Okay. All right. So I think we're going to get started, everyone. We have quite a big group. Just by way of introduction, I'm Ann Del Castillo, the Commissioner of the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. I'm going to speak for a few minutes and then get right to questions, but I want to start by thanking all of you for getting on this call. And hopefully you will get some really great information out of this. You know, since this crisis began, my team and I have been working day and night, 7 days a week. We are talking with stakeholders in media, entertainment and nightlife, industry leaders, business owners, cultural organizations and workers, freelancers and artists like all of you. We really want to understand what is it that you need now, and we want to know what you need in order to get back to work safely and quickly. We want to ensure that we're taking into account your experiences and needs as we work with our colleagues in government to respond to the immediate crisis and plan for recovery. I do know how much pain and anxiety so many of us are feeling, even if, you know, some of us are lucky enough to be healthy. But I also want to say that I see the strength and resilience and creativity of this community in particular, that despite whatever challenges you're experiencing, you still have managed to find ways to support your fellow New Yorkers with time, talent, and resources. And on behalf of the city, I want to thank you for all of that. It's that spirit that actually defines New York City's creative community. And I want you to know that the city government is here for you. Because we know that there's no recovery for New York without all of you. And so today we're here to help. We've brought together a fantastic group of colleagues who will have answers to many of your questions. I want to thank them as well for their time and introduce them to you. Commissioner Lorelei Salas. Oh, sorry, there's a housekeeping slide that should be up. And I'll go through that in a minute. So Commissioner Lorelei Salas of New York City's Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, along with her colleague, Deputy Commissioner of Labor and Policy Standards, Ben Holt. Liz Vladeck, Senior Labor Policy Advisor from the Mayor's Office of Policy and Planning, should be joining us as well shortly. And Jean Bay, Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs at the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. We're going to start off with a few questions that many of you submitted in advance when you were registering for the town call, and then we'll take questions from you in real time. If you would like to ask something, you can enter your question and name in the Q&A box, which you can access at the top of your screen, and your entries will only be visible to the host and the panelists. As was noted in this welcome screen, this event is being recorded. This event is being recorded and will be shared online, along with the information and resources that will be discussed during the session. So if you miss something, don't worry. And so now we're going to get on to your questions. I'm going to start off because we got a lot of questions about production and the status of that. And so I want to address those at the top. People have been asking in general, what are we doing to make sure that production gets up and running? And we have been in conversations with studios, stages, unions, and associations and others who are developing their plans for what it would take for them to get back up and running. What protocols are they putting in place? What info do they need from city government to help them plan? And what kind of support will they need to get back up and running, and what time frame? On the city side, we're talking to colleagues at City Hall, Department of Transportation, New York Police Department, Citywide Event Management, and a host of others to really work through all of the logistics that it would take to get production up and running. And as you can imagine, it takes quite a bit to get a city of 8.4 million that normally runs on a 24/7 schedule. As someone who came up through the arts and film and TV business prior to my work in government, I know that film and TV production fuels not just entertainment, but also a host of other industries in the city, from equipment and lumber to florists and cafes, so that when we bring production back, we will be bringing back a whole lot more for the city. But what I'd also say is a lot of the issues that govern how we would bring production back apply to all of the industry, the creative sectors represented on this call. And so those, like I said, are ongoing conversations. The focus of this session in particular is to really make sure that you as workers freelancers and artists get the information and resources you need about programs and services that the city and other government agencies have available to you. And so with that, I'm going to now kick it off. Again, with some of these are questions that we got from all of you when you were registering, and I'm going to start off with Commissioner Salas from Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. What are the main components of the Freelancing Isn't Free law, and what protections does this law offer me if I haven't been paid for freelance work?
Unmute first.
Oh.
Okay. Thank you so much, Commissioner Del Castillo, for hosting this this very important webinar and giving us the opportunity to bring information directly to New Yorkers who really are hungry for information. The audience today is really huge, and my colleague Ben and I are very glad to be able to participate. So I appreciate it. You know, New York City is one of those really progressive jurisdictions that have very important protections for workers. And obviously freelancers are workers too. And we are, I think still today, the only city that has a law that protects freelancers' right to get paid on time. So this is a very important protection because before that, what we heard from freelancers is that they often had a very difficult time collecting on the money owed to them by the hiring companies. And they often had to resort to going to court. And it wasn't really, it didn't make sense in many cases when you were owed maybe $2,000 under a contract and you had to hire a lawyer to represent you and pay them attorney's fees. So the law that has been in place for the last couple of years in New York City says that all the contracts that are over $800 or that amount to $800 or more must be in writing, right? So that's very important provision in the law that now it has, the contracts have to be memorialized so that we don't engage in these situations where there's a lot of confusion about what was agreed on, right? Now, the contract also must say when freelancer, when the freelancer is going to get paid. If the contract is silent, then the law says that the default would be 30 days after the freelancer has completed the services under the contract. There are also strong protections against retaliation in the law, and it has some really great incentives to get hiring companies to compensate freelancers on time. Freelancers can now go, I'm sorry, there's an echo, or I'm not sure if maybe someone's unmuted. No, I think someone is.
Yeah, someone is not muted. Sorry about that.
No. Okay, so so what I would also say is that freelancers who are not paid on time will be able to get attorney's fees under this law, so that they can get more assistance in recovering their wages, right? But we have court navigators in our office that are on hand to help facilitate the resolution of these complaints. It's been a very successful enforcement strategy. In the last 2 years, we've recovered over $1.5 million for freelancers in wages that they were owed. Oftentimes, when our court navigators intervene, that's all it takes for the hiring company to actually pay up the money that they owe the freelancers. So we urge freelancers to call us. They're not getting paid by the hiring companies. Call us at 311. I know that we're going to post the information on how to reach us on a slide, but our
yes, actually we have that, and we're going to pull that up right now.
Mm-hmm. But our court navigators are successful, and during this crisis in particular, you should know that we are fast tracking these types of complaints. In the last 5 weeks alone, we've facilitated the recovery of over $33,000 for freelancers who weren't paid in the last few weeks. And as you can see from the slide, there's an email that people can email us at freelancer@dca.nyc.gov or calling 311. So I will leave it there, but just to say that for us, it's very, very important that these laws are being complied with, and please let us know if you're having an issue with your payments.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Salas, for all of the work that you are doing on behalf of freelancers, especially. Is Liz on now? I'm sorry. Was she able to join yet?
Yes, hi everyone. Can you hear
great.
me?
Hi, yes. Welcome, Liz. And again, Liz Waddick is from the Mayor's Office of Policy and Planning and from the Labor Policy Division. So I think you also have a slide, Liz. We're going to bring that up for a moment. Liz, one of the questions that came in is with respect to the CARES Act and whether there are new provisions in the most recent CARES Act.
So sorry, can you repeat the question?
If there are new provisions that folks should be aware of in the recent CARES Act.
Sure. I mean, so I imagine that most folks on this call in this meeting are familiar with the significantly expanded unemployment benefits under the CARES Act. Most critically, the law explicitly provides for benefits, unemployment benefits for folks who otherwise would not ordinarily qualify. And so, of course, for folks who are self-employed, independent contractors running their own business, that's a critical support that is ordinarily not available. I saw one of the questions in the chat, and I'll say that this is, I think, probably topic number one, is that as folks know, as you've seen in the media, as many of you are, I'm sure, personally experiencing, the processing of claims is really challenging. The state and the country went from record low unemployment to record high unemployment in a matter of days. And so the ramping up that the state agency, the Department of Labor, has had to do is really, it's hard to overstate what a gap they've been working to cover. That said, you know, one of the things that has been a challenge is understanding clearly what the DOL needs to process workers' claims. We understand that everyone begins with the same application, regardless of your circumstances, and that once the Department of Labor, and this is required by the law, determines that you, for example, as an independent contractor, are not eligible for regular benefits, they should then automatically consider your application for this pandemic unemployment assistance, which is the expanded benefit. And there's not a really clear set of public information yet on exactly what that step-by-step process is. The United States Department of Labor has issued some guidances to the state agencies that I think is helping. But you know, they're all working their way through this. So I know it's been really frustrating for folks. The top question I get is, what should I do? My claim is pending. And I think the best advice, is be persistent. So I'm happy to go into more detail on any topic that would be helpful for folks, but let me just pause there.
Okay, thank you. Jean.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I mention one more thing quickly?
Yeah.
I apologize. So this is recent as of like yesterday. Originally, the guidance that DOL issued to folks who are self-employed, and generally their practice in the past, is that while they ask you for the federal employer ID number when you apply of any employers, including yours, so of any employers you've had, they haven't absolutely needed the worker to provide it in order to complete processing an application. As of yesterday, DOL has announced that lack of that FEIN, Federal Employer ID number, is the number one reason, the number one thing that's slowing down their processing of the PUA applications. They've said that they have sent over 300,000 letters to businesses around the state reminding them of their obligation to give that information to workers. But for anyone who's applying now should do that. And I have not seen a clear answer about what independent contractors or folks who are self-employed should put in if they don't have an FEIN. So I would continue to monitor that issue. And I would also just add quickly that if, in my experience so far, Twitter is actually the best place to get the most up-to-date information. It's where DOL does the most sort of updating day to day of, you know, what the particular conditions are that day. Thanks.
Actually, Liz, also this question, and you know, I think you've touched on part of it in your remarks, but you know, another question is, if I'm an independent contractor or gig worker, how does that work? You know, you refer to the expansion of benefits, but like, how do they go about applying?
Yeah, so the process itself, I think, is not horribly difficult, particularly in the last few weeks, where DOL has launched a new website for folks to file any new claims. And so, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the slide. Yeah, so the application process for all workers is the same. You can, I would start with this top link, labor.ny.gov, how to file a claim. And there will be links there. You will need to create an ID with the state of New York, because you will, if you can, you will do most of this communication online. The new system, I understand, makes it relatively easy to enter your information. You should really have available all the information about your income, your recent income. The more evidence of income you can show, the higher your benefit is likely to be. The part we don't know the answer to is, you know, this is a two-step process. So once DOL figures out that, you know, you're an independent contractor, so you don't get regular unemployment benefits, what exactly they're doing at that point. It seems that some applications by independent contractors processing can be completed without folks having to provide additional information. On the other hand, there's plenty of folks who have you know, been reported being asked for additional information. There is a form specifically an application for PUA pandemic unemployment assistance on the DOL website. So that move from initial eligibility review to processing, you know, coverage and initiation of benefits under the PUA, that's, you know, a part of the process that's challenging and not totally transparent yet.
Right. One last question just for this round is, what if I'm making more from unemployment insurance, but my employer wants me to go back to work?
Yeah, so people may know that ordinarily requirements to be eligible for benefits, regardless of how you earn your income, but one of the requirements is that you have to be available and willing to and able to work. Now, it's been very clear, it's clear from the US DOL and the State Department of Labor that those requirements are relaxed during this time. It's obvious, we know that so many businesses are closed that many people, there is no work. And so DOL doesn't request you to show proof you're looking for work. But the federal government and the state government are both very clear. If you refuse an offer of work simply because you don't want to go to work, if you don't have a COVID-based reason for saying you can't go to work, you are opening yourself up to fraud charges and being required to pay back some of your benefits. So that's just a risk to watch out for. Let me say though, partial benefits are available. And I'm sure folks have heard about the extra $600 a week under the CARES Act. That extra $600 comes in if you're receiving any benefits whatsoever. So if you qualify, if you work fewer than 4 days a week, you make less than $500 a week in your employment, you would probably qualify for at least some small sum of unemployment benefits, and that would trigger the additional $600. So I know everybody's got we're all balancing or trying to balance and not able to balance our checkbooks. So that's something to consider as you are running down the ledger.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Jean, I think you also have a slide, right?
Yeah.
And just to remind everyone, Jean is from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. And so one of the big questions is, if I'm undocumented, can I file for unemployment insurance?
Yes, I can start with that one. Generally speaking, in order to apply for unemployment, you need work authorization. And while this sounds really weird, actually some undocumented immigrants have work authorization. DACA recipients, meaning people who have come here when they're young as children and then have been here and apply for work authorization is a good example. Temporary protected status recipients, there are some people who actually have work authorization, even though they might be considered undocumented. Those people can apply for unemployment insurance. If you do not have work authorization, unfortunately, you are not eligible for unemployment insurance. And the city recognizes that a lot of undocumented immigrants are currently not receiving the financial assistance they need during this dire time, and they may have lost their jobs and having trouble. So we are working with philanthropic organizations and sort of other parties to address this gap. You may have heard about some of the efforts that we have been doing in the news, and we are trying to make sure that these sort of benefit availability is broad as possible. Right now it's starting really small, but we are hoping that there will be multiple phases and then more funding available. So, and I also want to emphasize that there are many city services and benefits that are available to everyone regardless of the immigration status. And Moya has actually put together a website, and this is available to anyone, even if you're not immigrant. If you want sort of one-stop like list of all the benefits that you can utilize. It's available at our website, nyc.gov/immigrants/coronavirus, or even if you just go to nyc.gov/immigrants, it'll be the first thing that pops up. So you'll be able to see the list of resources.
Okay, so that answers one of the other questions, which was, are there resources for undocumented folks who've lost employment?
Yeah.
But I guess, are there financial resources for?
So currently, the challenges with financial resources is that legally it's really hard for the government to provide direct financial assistance to undocumented immigrants, which is partly why right now most of the assistance that's provided is through in-kind services. So whether it's food delivery or whether it's housing assistance or some of the other ways. But having said it, if you're living in a mixed status family and your immediate family member is documented or a citizen, that could be potentially a way for you to apply for cash assistance. So that's something for you to keep in mind if you might be able to, for instance, apply on behalf of your child. And to inquire further about this issue, we actually have a hotline, Action NYC hotline. It's 1-800-354-0365. If that seems too mouthful and can't remember, you can call 311 and say that you want to talk to Action NYC, and you'll be referred to our hotline. Another thing I wanted to mention, because it was raised in the question, is that even if you are not a citizen, or even if you do not have green card, as somebody who's a foreign national that has been here, if you have valid social security number for work, and you have been here for a certain period of time, there is a sort of an IRS test. Basically, if you have been here long enough to file tax as an alien resident in the United States, which many of you do, you should be eligible for the stimulus check that a lot of people talked about under CARES Act. So just to make sure that for that, you have to make sure that if you have not filed your tax for 2018 and 2019, you need to go to the website and put in just the very basic information about yourself and your home address, etc., so that the check can be delivered to you. But make sure that you take advantage of that, because it is available to you.
Okay, great, thank you. Oh, actually, there was one more too. For folks that get their visas through their work, who may have been laid off, what does that mean for them?
So it depends on your visa status, which is why I'm hesitant to get into the details.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Generally speaking, let's say you got work visa through your employer, so let's say H-1B or whatever it is, and then your employer basically terminated your employment. Generally speaking, that doesn't mean that you are basically about to be deported tomorrow. So I want to make sure that you stay calm. Basically, you most likely, I say very generally, don't think of this as a definite legal advice, but generally speaking, your visa is valid until the expiration date. Having said this, you probably might have to take, and most likely you will have to take some action, either to switch your visa status from one to another, or you might have to report that, okay, my employer terminated and I have a new employer, and you basically have to change your employer and report that to USCIS, or there are basically probably some actions that you have to take to make sure that you can stay here legally. And so the best thing to do is to consult an immigration attorney. You can call our Action NYC hotline, but right now, a lot of Action NYC questions are addressed through sort of immigration professionals who are not necessarily lawyers and not being able to provide this kind of very technical legal advice on visa. So if it gets to that level, we actually recommend that you call New York City Bar Association. They provide pro bono legal services if in need. And so the number is provided in the slide, and you can also just Google NYC Bar Association, hotline.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm actually going to come back to Lorelei, Commissioner Salas, for a second. Going back to some of what you were talking about in terms of the work that you're doing at DCWP, in terms of the paid sick leave law, what should everyone know about this in terms of COVID coverage? And that was for Lorelei, and I think she's muted. So Kevin, if you could pull off her mute so she can respond. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask Ben Holt to help me with this answer.
Sure.
Is he still on?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm here.
Oh, perfect.
Hey, thank you, Anne. So yes, we have a paid sick leave law in New York City that is very broad and does cover a variety of COVID-related scenarios. And first, I would just note that it covers employees, including essential employees, and that immigration status doesn't matter at all for purposes of the New York City paid sick leave law. So whether you're undocumented, a citizen, or any other status, that's completely irrelevant to whether or not you are covered under this law. So what the New York City paid sick leave law does is it covers diagnosis, care, treatment, illness, a variety of different health situations, including things like staying home to observe or recover from symptoms of COVID-19. It also covers the situation where your employer's workplace has been closed by a public order. So the executive orders that we have in New York State now closing down non-essential businesses do trigger coverage under New York City's paid sick leave law. It also covers situations in which your child's school has been closed, which again, we're in that situation now with the closure of New York City public schools. And other schools in the area. It's also got one of the broadest definitions of family member. You can use your New York City paid sick leave for yourself, but also for a family member. And that includes someone that you're related to by blood, but also anyone with whom you have a family-like relationship. So it's a very progressive and broad definition. Most people who are employees are going to be covered by this and able to use it if they're experiencing a COVID-19 health situation or a school or work closure. Now, under the city law, you get up to 5 days or 40 hours of paid sick leave, with the exception that for certain small employers with fewer than 5 employees, the leave is unpaid. Now, how you use this is your employer is supposed to be giving you this leave, information about this leave during your employment. You're accruing the leave as you're working, and they are meant to directly make this available to you. Now, if you have a problem using it or accessing it, what you can do is contact our office. The most direct way to do that is to email us at olps@dca.nyc.gov. You can also call us at 311 and say paid sick leave, and you'll be routed to us. Now, during COVID-19, although our law applies, there's also 2 additional emergency paid sick leave laws that have been passed, one at the state level and one at the federal level. And Liz and Lorelei should both obviously jump in with additional thoughts on this. But generally speaking, the state emergency paid sick leave law covers someone who has an order of quarantine or isolation from a healthcare provider. Now, there have been some questions about how to get one of those, and just recently, the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene has issued a blanket order that anyone can use, provided it's accompanied by a doctor's note or recommendation of quarantine or isolation. And I don't know that we have that information on the slide now, but we can certainly provide the direct links to how someone would access that. And under the state law, the amount of leave that you're able to get varies by employer size, but it's up to 2 weeks. And once you've exhausted your state emergency paid sick leave law, you may also be eligible for paid family leave under state law. Now, like our city law, this is something that employers are supposed to provide directly to workers. If you have a problem accessing it or an employer refuses to give it to you, the thing to do would be to contact the New York State Department of Labor. The third law that's in play now is the federal emergency paid sick leave law, which is broader than what exists under New York State, but not quite as broad as what we have in New York City. It covers things like quarantine, someone who's experiencing symptoms and seeking medical diagnosis, someone who's observing quarantine under a doctor's advice. It also covers people who are caring for a family member who's subject to quarantine, or similarly to what we have in New York City, a child whose school has been ordered to be closed. Now, the one thing to know about the federal law, one of the big exceptions is that it does not apply to businesses that have 500 or more employees, so large employers are not covered. There is also a carve out for certain small employers with 50 or fewer employees where that employer is experiencing financial hardship. Now, under the federal law, you get up to 10 days of paid sick leave. And similarly, the way to exercise your rights, if an employer is not giving you your federal paid sick leave, is to contact the U.S. Department of Labor. Now, we've created some materials about how to comply with our New York City workplace laws during the crisis, but also with some information about these other state and federal paid sick leave laws. That guidance is available on our website if you go to nyc.gov/workers. And it gets into some of the differences in terms of the coverage, amount of leave, a rate of pay for leave, and also provides additional information on where you can find out more. 2 just quick notes. These 3 laws apply to employees, but certainly I think given the audience for this call, it's important to note that while they cover employees, who qualifies as an employee is a legal question. And what determines whether or not you're an employee under the law are really the facts about your working relationship. Things like who's controlling the work, who's controlling how much it's going to cost, the degree of supervision or oversight you might have in doing that. It does not depend on whether or not you are paid by a W-2 or a 1099. I think a lot of people will take that to mean that they are an independent contractor if they're paid by 1099, but that's not actually the case. Many people are paid by 1099 and actually being misclassified as independent contractors, while they really should be getting not just access to paid sick leave, but other benefits that come with qualifying as an employee. Now, for anyone who's unsure about that, this is a question that we look at a lot. So if you think you may have been misclassified and have questions about your eligibility for paid sick leave, you can contact our office, again, via 311 or through OLPS at dca.nyc.gov. And then the last note for self-employed persons with respect to paid sick leave, and again, I think this is something that Liz or others may want to chime in on with more details, but under one of the federal laws that's been passed in the context of COVID-19, there's a new self-employed tax credit for paid sick leave. So people working as independent contractors who are self-employed, who are unable to work for up to 10 days because they are sick or recovering from COVID-19 may be able to claim that time as a tax credit on their 2020 tax return, and also may be able to reduce their estimated tax payments in the lead up to filing their 2020 return. So those are just a couple of things to flag for people who aren't sure which category they fall into in terms of employee or independent contractor.
Thank you so much. So I think with that, we can probably open it up, right, Jose? Because I think we've got a lot of questions that have come in.
Great, thanks, Ann. We're getting several questions from folks who whose application for unemployment insurance is pending, but they cannot get through. What should those folks be doing? I've got questions from folks who are being denied via mail, but they're not able to speak to a representative at DOL. What should they be doing?
Yeah, and I looked over at the chat at the Q&A, and I see that just saying be persistent is really, you know, not very helpful. And I know it's not. And, you know, that's why there is such a building public narrative about the challenge that departments of labor all around the country are facing in getting folks into the system. I think so be persistent sounds easy to say, but it's easy to say, but once you really dig into what does that mean, you know, it means keep calling and keep calling and keep calling and check your online account. As I said, you have to have a state ID and account through which or you don't have to, but it makes it much easier to deal with your claims. So, you know, contact your elected representative, your member of Congress or your assembly person, your state senator, you know, at the DOL on Twitter. There doesn't seem to be a consistent pattern in who is able to get through and get things fully processed and who isn't, which does make it harder to give better advice than be persistent. Right, so let me pause there.
Okay, we have a few questions from folks whose hours have been cut down to part-time work. What are the options for them? If employers are offering work at half the hourly rate, or for folks whose hours are being cut, are they required to take those offers?
Yeah, and I would actually relate that same question to a number of other questions that I saw about, you know, what if you're working part-time and your employer isn't engaged with this special part-time process? So the way this works is that once you are certified for benefits, you still have to go in and claim your benefits every week. And in any given week, you know, the system is well designed for folks whose hours fluctuate, whose income fluctuates. Your claim will be open for, I think it's a year. And during that year, you can claim benefits for, now because of the CARES Act, 39 of those weeks. But if there's a week when, for example, you've got, you know, you make more than $500, you work more than 3 days, you don't certify for that week. You're not going to receive benefits for that week. Any week where you work less than that and earn less than that, if you've got an open claim, and if that's including if that's what your income looked like before, you know, up and down. And I saw too that a lot of folks are, it's confusing sort of what they should provide in terms of evidence of income. Provide anything you have. Provide check stubs, bank statements, even if you haven't filed taxes yet for last year, if you didn't need to, you know, anything you have that is evidence of your income, and regardless of how it came in, whether through W-2 or 1099, as long as it was on the books, so to speak, just include that in your application, and that all gets considered for purposes of determining.
Did we lose Liz?
Sorry, I'm here.
Okay, okay. Oh, so were you done? Because it cut out at the last.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, okay.
Sorry. My 6-year-old's doing his Zoom meetings too, so I'm trying to be muted whenever I can.
Got you, okay.
So we have several questions from folks working in theater, music, film production, nightlife industry, who are concerned that the expiration of the CARES Act extension of unemployment insurance is going to run out sooner than those industries may come back. What are we telling those folks?
Yeah, we're telling those folks what I think we're saying to anybody with that concern, which includes, you know, most New York state and city policymakers and advocates, which is, we think that it's great how expanded but the benefits are right now, the extra $600 a week. It's so great, but we don't think it's the right outcome to say that the amount you can claim and how long you can claim it has an expiration date. We don't know what's going to be happening over the coming months. And so we think those benefits need to be available. And it's something that the city and I believe the state as well are both advocating for, because that's a change that has to be made in Washington.
Thank you. We have a question about paid sick leave. What are paid sick options for entertainment and production workers?
Lorelei, Ben? Oh, great.
Paid sick leave, it doesn't depend on the industry. It depends on the employment or independent contractor status. If you're working in that industry as an employee, then you will qualify for New York City paid sick leave. And to the extent that it is covered by the state or federal emergency laws, you would qualify for those as well. I think for someone who is working in that industry as an independent contractor, the only thing I'm aware of is the new federal tax credit that I mentioned, which could reduce your estimated tax payments leading up to the 2020 filing.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, let us make that determination, right? If anything, just file with us, call us. We'll make sure that we do the analysis to see if you're eligible for the benefits.
We have some questions about immigration status. What are the options for folks with O1 visas?
Oh.
Just to clarify, what do you mean by option? Benefit options?
Yeah. So we have a question from Kieran who says they have work authorization on an O1 visa. It is attached to their agent and not any specific employer. Can they apply for unemployment benefits?
Oh yeah, there have been a lot of repeating questions on that, so I can actually say that here. So generally, Liz probably can actually answer better than I do, because it's not necessarily about your immigration status, as in like you're here, on a valid visa, and I'm assuming you have, valid work authorization. So it's not necessarily an issue of that, so long as you hadn't work authorization before, and now that's not an issue. The issue is more that you're a self-employed person. And so that I think depending on your situation, you might be eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance, as Liz had mentioned. And check the New York State Department of Labor website to see whether you're eligible. They have sort of a checklist to sort of help you sort through to see whether you're eligible or not. And then actually one other thing I wanted to highlight, because a lot of people were asking what other benefits that they could potentially be eligible is, again, as I mentioned, in terms of the CARE Act economic impact payment, which is the stimulus check that a lot of people talk about. Even if you don't have a green card, you're here as on a valid visa status with valid social security number, and you have been here for a certain period of time. It's called IRS substantial presence test, and I can send the link to you. And basically that, as long as you meet those qualifications, you might be actually be able to get the stimulus check. So that's also something to look out for.
And let me just add that one of the things that expanded unemployment, the pandemic unemployment assistance does, one of the reasons it's there is specifically for folks who may not meet the earnings threshold. In order to qualify for unemployment benefits, you have in New York State, you have to have a record of a certain length of time that you've worked and a certain amount of money that you've earned. And that's not the case for under the pandemic unemployment assistance. So whatever income you've had in recent months is what would be evaluated.
Liz, do we still have you?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, great.
Sorry, I'll start just saying I'm done when I'm finished.
Yeah, I thought you were done. It just cut out right before you finished your last word. Sorry.
We have a few questions from folks who work in New York City but live outside the state of New York. What should they be doing about filing for unemployment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the general advice is file where you did the work. There are a couple caveats to that. The first one is if you've done work in multiple states, frankly, like get online and see which state has a higher weekly benefit, maximum weekly benefit. So for example, New Jersey's I think is something like $713, the maximum amount they'll pay per week. So if you've got income from multiple states, apply in whatever state you want. But be aware that one of the requirements under the CARES Act is that the Departments of Labor check with other states to determine whether you're eligible for regular benefits under those state laws because of income you had in that state. And the guidance for like what happens if you earned X amount in New Jersey and Y amount in New York, there's not really super clear public guidance on that yet. So I know folks are having a range of issues when it comes to working and living in different states and things taking longer and processes not being clear. And you know that's a pain point in the process of getting benefits certified. Okay, I'm muting.
All right, we have several questions pertaining to large gatherings as well as film production. What is the path back for those kinds of events and activities? And what kinds of health and safety precautions should those folks be expecting going forward?
So those are definitely questions that we've been talking about with the in the conversations that I referenced earlier, where we're talking with folks across the various industry sectors that our portfolio covers. So that's production, it's entertainment, it's venues, it's theater. And what the approach that we're taking is we want to understand what are the specific considerations people have for those industries. So for example, in production, you know, that functions very differently than an event space. And so what we're asking folks in the unions, in the case of film and TV, we're talking to the stages, the studios, the unions, to really come up with a kind of proposal for how they would work and what that would look like. What are some of the questions they need answered from government? And then as we're looking at that with them, we can also ask them questions, ask them to fill some of the gaps that we might identify. Because one of the things that we don't want to do, like, there's going to be policy guidance that comes from the state and the city and the health officials. But we want to make sure that the guidance that our agency is recommending, the input that we have, makes sense for the industries and how they work. And so that's really how we're asking for that kind of feedback, so that we can form our recommendations for when the city opens up. These are the things that we need to take into account. So for example, yesterday I was talking to colleagues at Parks and Department of Transportation and Cultural Affairs to hear what are some of the concerns that they're hearing from their constituents as well. And that's really how we're approaching it. I don't have any hard guidelines right now. It's an ongoing conversation, and each of those conversations are really informing how we're approaching this in our conversations about restart.
Thank you. We have a couple questions related to health insurance. What should folks be doing if they've lost their health insurance due to unemployment? Currently, this is from someone who says they're not even being offered COBRA coverage.
So I can get that answer started. The two things I would suggest folks do right away is, or that you can start with one or the other. The New York State Exchange, the Obamacare health coverage, the state exchange, has extended enrollment, the enrollment period through May 15th. Ordinarily, by the end of January, you cannot change your health insurance in the course of the year. So I would go to that website. I think it's New York State of Health. If you Google that, I think it'll get you there. And see what kinds of plans they can offer. The second thing I would suggest is, New York City announced a year and a half ago that we are building a program to ensure that anybody who is having trouble getting access to healthcare can get it. And so if you call 111 and get connected to NYC Care is the name of the program, you should be able to speak to someone who can determine whether you would qualify for an insurance program that the city supports, it's Metro Plus, or whether you might be referred for a sliding scale, pay as you can basis at the city's public hospitals. Though I know that raises the implication of the public hospitals are really consumed with COVID patients, but those are the two places I would suggest getting started, particularly since premium payments on any of these insurance products may turn out to be actually less than your COBRA might be.
Thank you. We have some questions from folks who are asking about their corporate status as freelancers. So there's someone who operates as a small LLC, someone who operates as a C Corp, another as an S Corp. What should they be doing about accessing unemployment insurance?
Yeah, so apply. I echo what the commissioner said, just apply. I know some people have done so and have been told you're not eligible because you are your own employer, you are an LLC. You can appeal and you should. But in terms of just getting started to apply, DOL has now created an information section on their website specifically for folks who are self-employed to give some guidance, some very specific guidance on what you should do if that is your situation. I would say that one thing that will be important is that you're able to show that through your business, you pay your salary through your business, and a lot of your work is through the business as well.
Thank you. We also have some questions from folks who are both 1099 and W-2, who are not able to get into the system. What's the advice that we're giving them? Yeah.
So again, you're going to submit all the evidence you have of any income. However, what DOL is going to count for your actual income in determining your base pay is only one or the other. So if you've earned enough money through W-2 jobs to qualify for regular benefits, then they're going to determine a benefit based on only your W-2 income. If you don't have enough W-2 income to qualify for regular benefits, but you have 1099 income, then they're going to calculate your regular benefit using your 1099 income. Now, you should note that one very important difference between what DOL counts as income for W-2 versus 1099 is that when they're looking at your W-2s, they're looking at your gross pay, but when they're looking at your 1099s, they're only looking at your net pay. So that is a real problem. And I would just say from the policy point of view, again, a lot of this is federal law that I think many of us disagree with. And I think there are many here, including myself, who strongly agree with the notion that the system doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and work is work, and benefits should be benefits, and income should be income. So we recognize that that's a real problem with the existing framework.
Thank you. Can you receive unemployment insurance benefits and paid sick leave at the same time?
So you can't, but again, I want to go back to this issue of certification. If you have paid sick leave available that you can use, you should use it. If you are collecting unemployment benefits and all of a sudden paid sick leave becomes available to you, take your paid sick leave and just don't certify for the period of time when you're receiving the paid sick leave benefits. Your claim remains open. And once your paid sick leave runs out, log back into the DOL unemployment system and certify for the week when you no longer have that source of income.
Okay, we're still getting several questions about what is the city's timeline for issuing film permits?
So, you know, at the moment we are still on, the governor has issued a pause order through the 15th of May. We have continued to extend the suspension of permits through that period. This time around, we had extended it through the end of May 31st, so permits are suspended through the 31st of May. We had actually done that in anticipation because our initial suspension was through the 17th of April. There is I think all street activities like large gathering event permits are canceled through the end of June. Right now, we're still in conversations about what a restart would look like, how things may open up. But by and large, we're following the governor's and mayor's guidance on this. And so in about 2 weeks, we'll start to reevaluate. I know that's a very unsatisfactory answer to many folks, but we are really just trying to get a handle on what it would look like to open up the city streets, what the health, I mean, first and foremost, it's the health considerations that we have to take into account. We need to make sure that the numbers are still low and that all of the indicators that the mayor and the governor are looking for are met before we can even begin to talk about opening film permits again.
This is a question from Camille regarding labor law. How do we stop employers from taking advantage of contract and part-time workers on unemployment? For example, if their employer asks them to work for a lower rate during this time, knowing that if they say no, are they possibly committing fraud by claiming unemployment?
Yeah, so that's a really tough and frustrating one. If your employer offers you work and you turn it down and you don't have a COVID-related reason to turn it down, then you can the DOL can come at you to claim that you shouldn't have received certain benefits. Something I really want to emphasize though is that the list of COVID-related reasons that might make you unable to accept a job offer is pretty long and it's not exhaustive. So I would refer back to that. The DOL has a lot of information on that. And so consider when you're dealing with these challenges, if they fall under any of the COVID-related reasons, if they can relate to that. And the other thing is, DOL has said, file a complaint if you are having these kinds of problems. I can't really speak to what happens once you file that kind of complaint. I don't know if others on the call want to add anything to that.
Okay, let's go to a question from Fernanda. What is the total weeks difference between unemployment benefits and CARES Act benefits?
Sure. So so your regular unemployment benefit, your weekly benefit amount, in a few minutes, your weekly benefit amount is determined, as I said, by looking at your income. That amount is its own calculation. There's actually a benefits calculator on the DOL's website, so you can anticipate yourself what you think it should be. The minimum weekly benefit in New York State right now, I think, is about $178. The maximum amount is $504. So no matter what, you're going to be in that range. And then whatever that, Sasha, please keep it down, honey. Whatever that amount is, you will receive an extra $600 a week under the CARES Act through the end of July. So if you get the minimum weekly benefit, $178, add $600 to it. If you get the maximum, $504, add $600.
Okay. That was it, right, Liz? Okay.
Okay, here's a question from Zach. Can gig workers declare use of the New York City paid sick leave law as well, since entire industries are being closed by the state and civil authority orders?
So I think this is really another version of a question we had before, but it doesn't really matter if you are a gig worker or any other type of worker or what industry you work in. The paid sick leave law in New York City and the state and federal laws as well will only apply to people who are considered employees, meaning that they have enough control over their own work, setting their own schedules, how they're going to do the work, et cetera. To be independent contractors. So really it comes down to that same question. If a gig worker is subject to enough control that they're an employee, then they would be covered by paid sick leave. However, if they don't have enough control, then paid sick leave would not apply. And that includes in a situation where their workplace or a child's school is closed.
I would just add also that there is legislation pending before the City Council that seeks to expand these paid sick leave benefits to freelancers, independent contractors, right? But we, the legislation was introduced. There hasn't been a hearing on that yet, but it's potentially scheduled for sometime next week. So obviously, freelancers should think about testifying and making their voices heard.
There's a follow-up on that from Elliot. Do they qualify for that paid sick leave if they live in New York City, but the employer is in another county?
So for New York City paid sick leave, you're covered if you work in New York City. So it doesn't matter where you live. The question is really where you work. So if you're working as an employee in New York City, but living in New Jersey or Connecticut or somewhere else, you would still be covered in New York City.
Okay, this is a question from Dimitri, who works on set as a medic and works as a per diem. Can they apply for unemployment?
Yes, and you should. Again, what DOL looks at in figuring out your weekly benefit is any source of income, any wages. As I said earlier, if that is W-2 income, which can include a lot of per diem work, then that's what they're going to rely on. If it's 1099, they may wonder if you're doing per diem work as under a 1099, they may wonder if you've been misclassified, and they may take a look at that, and that may take longer. But either way, you should definitely file.
Yeah, thank you. What if someone has to leave their work as a result of a mental health issue? Are they still eligible for benefits?
I think I don't know the answer to that. My guess, and I emphasize that word guess, is that if a healthcare provider determined that the mental health issue the person faced was related to COVID, that they were having a medical problem related to COVID because of COVID, they would likely be able to apply for benefits. But again, I'm guessing on that.
And just to supplement that, although it's limited to 5 days, obviously in New York City, mental health situations are covered under New York City's paid sick leave law. So that would be some limited coverage up to the 5 days that the city provides.
Are there any resources or organizations that folks can turn to get help with their unemployment insurance applications?
Yeah, so I would make a few suggestions. One is if you call 311 and you say you have an employment-related claim and you need legal help, you should be connected to legal services providers who may be able to give you some guidance. The second is that the City Bar Association is providing some support to folks. So again, I would call them. And then the other thing is on the one hand, there are attorneys whose entire practice is focused on unemployment claims and appeals of denials or issues. But on the other hand, again, the lack of really comprehensive guidance on the CARES Act and how it relates to regular unemployment makes it really difficult for even the most seasoned attorneys to be able to sort of counsel you on exactly what you should do and exactly what's going to happen. I know that's really frustrating and unsatisfying, but one way or another, if you feel you're not getting the right outcome with DOL, you think you're falling under the wrong program or you've been denied altogether, your benefit amount is wrong, use one of those approaches to consult with an attorney. You have the right to appeal those determinations by DOL if you disagree with them.
I'd like to add something, and it's not related to unemployment insurance benefits, but it's regarding other benefits that are coming down from the federal government. So there's some student loan debt relief programs. There are also, for individuals who may be unbanked and need access to, or would like access to a bank account or direct deposit information so they can get their money in sooner and not wait for a paper check. We have counselors across New York City that are available and to work one-on-one with New Yorkers as long as they are over the age of 18. It does not matter your employment status, your immigration status. These counselors speak different languages. And so there are financial counselors that will keep your information confidential, but they have been trained on all the most up-to-date like reliefs and benefits that are coming down from the federal government. And it's very easy to access this, their help, either calling 311 or also visiting our website and making an appointment online at nyc.gov/talkmoney. Again, if you want additional assistance to determine what other benefits you may apply for, the counselors are also regularly helping New Yorkers to deal with debt. So if you credit card debt, if you have some other type of obligations, there oftentimes will call your creditors and help you to manage that your finances.
Jose, in response to some of the questions I've also seen about sort of legal assistance in trying to figure out some of this stuff, the Department of Cultural Affairs has also put together an incredible list of resources for artists on their site, and they are pointing people to the Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts. So I just want to make sure that people on this call are aware of that as a resource as well.
It's a question from Kirsten. What are the rights of workers with disabilities once the economy reopens, and those workers may be still be considered high risk and cannot return to work? Are they still eligible to claim unemployment?
So I feel like a broken record here that there is no answer to that yet. And in fact, issues under the American with Disabilities Act and the amended act and the state and city protections for folks with disabilities, this is going to be a whole new area of law, which is what kinds of accommodations should workers be entitled to based on their particular medical circumstances, and how that interacts with COVID, how we are working as a society. So I'm sorry to tell you that if that's, you know, part of your, something that's happening in your life, you're going to be making new law, unfortunately.
I would add to that, because some of the people on the call may not be aware of the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. They are definitely tracking these issues and have some resource information available on their website as well. And we have links to that on the MOME site.
So a question from Derek. Is it possible to receive benefits from multiple states?
No, you're going to only receive benefits from one state. And again, what will happen is that if you've got evidence of income from different states, whichever state you file it with is actually obligated to check and see whether you qualify under, you know, regular unemployment in another state. It's not totally clear, at least to me, what happens if you do. You know, for example, if you've got more income in New Jersey, but you file in New York, are you automatically to New Jersey? I'm not sure about that, but either way, you're only going to get one set of benefits from one state.
It's a question from Barbie. What are the expectations for keeping a work search record for gig workers?
Yeah, so that hasn't, we don't have a very explicit guidance, but what is clearly indicated both by the federal government and by the state government is that we all know that many of us are on, you know, we're under a stay-at-home order. And if you can't go to work because of the stay-at-home order or because your, you know, employer closed or because there's not a lot of work right now. So I would say if you are looking for work, keep track of it. But especially the pandemic unemployment assistance is, you know, meant to sort of accommodate the reality that there's a lot of issues with getting work right now.
It's a question from Michael. Are childcare concerns a valid COVID-related reason to turn down work?
Yes, if you have a school-age child, for example, who's now at home because schools are closed, that is explicitly a reason that you are entitled to pandemic unemployment assistance. One thing that people are starting to think about, many parents, of course, put their kids in some kind of a summer camp, and that's the childcare for the summer. There's no word yet, obviously, on what's going to be with summer camp this year, but the US DOL has been explicit that if in fact we're still in the same scenario that summer camps are closed and so parents still have to be home because we are the childcare for our kids at this point, that will continue to be covered under pandemic unemployment assistance. And just a reminder that at this point, right, so let me stop there.
Follow up on that from Eric. Is there anywhere where people can find the list of reasons why they might not be able to return to work due to COVID?
Yeah, so I would check on the State Department of Labor's website. If you go poking around on the United States Department of Labor site, they've put out some guidances on how that's going to be, you know, applied, but it's not, I don't think provided an exhaustive list of reasons that you might be denied. Instead, they're really trying to emphasize the message that, you know, unless you're currently using paid leave, the strong likelihood is that
We lost that last part.
oh, sorry. So unless you are currently using paid leave, or unless you have turned down an offer of work, explicitly just said you won't do it, not that you can't do it, but that you won't do it, Those are the only reasons that the government has said explicitly you would not be eligible for benefits under regular UI or the CARES Act. Instead, at the state and federal level, the government is emphasizing the strong likelihood if you're not using paid leave and you haven't rejected work that you could do, you should be eligible for benefits.
There's a question about production from Therese. There are some socially distant productions currently going on, and there are companies working on creating standard operating procedures for the future. What can they expect as far as guidance and requirements going forward?
You know, as I've been saying, we're really trying to get a read on what, look, there's the larger issue of like, how do we open up? How many, like, how long are the social distancing guidelines going to stay in place? And yes, there's certainly certain productions that can operate even remotely, you know, animation to a certain extent, you know, post-production. I know they still have work that they're doing. There may be a scenario in which there are small shoots that could happen, but again, it really depends on the guidance from both state and city in terms of whether the public health metrics that they're using are being met, and what how they're going to open up. You know, we opened, I think the state announced that they were opening up marinas and golf courses. So, you know, they're really looking at some of the different things that can open up at different times. And so we are engaged in an ongoing conversation with all of the parties that are in charge of those decisions. With respect to specific guidance, it's partly why we're just having multiple conversations with multiple parties, because we do understand that shooting on a stage is very different than shooting on location, and stages come in all different sizes. They all have different rules for how people film there. And so trying to take that all into account so that we can provide as specific and nuanced guidance as we can to address those particular situations. But I think a lot of it is going to come from the various stakeholders. The input that we need is going to come from the variety of stakeholders that have different concerns for how production works.
As a follow-up on that from Kevin, do you think productions will require a waiver for all employees to return to work?
I mean, look, that I don't know. Like we don't deal with the specifics of that. What I am hearing from some of the various stakeholders that we've been talking to is they are looking at, you know, what are the cleaning protocols for the various sites that people will work on? What are the, you know, will there be different types of equipment that people have to use, like gloves, masks, like those are all being considered. So what I would say is, you know, if you're in a union, talk to your union. If you are part of a trade association, you know, talk to your other folks and come forward with proposals. We're listening to everything and you know, sharing those kinds of conversations with each of the stakeholders that we're talking to.
It's a question from Stephanie, who says their employer withheld their tax info this year as a 1099 worker, and they reported to the IRS in February. Will they still be able to access unemployment benefits?
Yes, you should be able to. There's no doubt that the employer is legally required to report that to the state, and that's part of how the state determines your benefit. It is the case that because there may be an enforcement aspect here, it may take longer to get your claim processed. But this is something you should flag for the State Department of Labor if you've already filed or if you're going to file.
It's a question from Alex. How should people declare money to the Department of Labor if they're awarded micro grants from an artist relief fund or similar organization?
Just say what it is. Just, you know, if you've got a letter, submit the letter. Just, you know, during the application process, you're asked to give information about any employers. What that means really is sources of income, wages defined broadly. So just submit that information and DOL will parse through it.
Just a heads up that we have 10 minutes. So I just want to make sure that, you know, we get in whatever. I know there's a lot of questions still to be addressed and we're trying to consolidate them based on common themes.
I have a question from Shira, who is stuck out of the country as a result of COVID-related travel restrictions. Can they apply for unemployment from out of the country, or do they have to wait till they return?
So what you should do is apply, don't wait, but flag in your application that this is the situation. In ordinary times, DOL has provision in certain circumstances for folks to continue certifying for benefits, even though they may be out of state, but that is done on a case-by-case basis. So the key thing is just to be upfront and provide that information to DOL as part of your initial application.
It's a question from Mark. What is the proper response if an entertainment production vendor is currently offering you work, but they are a non-essential business and should be closed due to the pause order?
Yeah, go ahead, Ann, go ahead.
No, I mean, mine is just, you know, I suppose if you could do it from home, but that's not obviously the question that they're asking. I would have to probably follow up and get back unless you have some guidance on that, Liz or Lorelei.
Well, actually, Anne, that's a good flag that I should have mentioned earlier. There is another basis under which DOL might deny an application for benefits. If you can telework, if your job can be done via telework and you are equipped to do so, and your employer offers you that option and you refuse it, that would be a basis for DOL to deny benefits. However, if your employer is a non-essential business and telework is not a possibility, you should file with DOL. And I would advise, and it's not legal advice, it's just like person on the street advice, but I would suggest also filing a complaint with the Department of Labor because that should not be happening.
You should also know that the city has been helping to make sure that these that only businesses that are providing essential services are the ones that are operating, right? So if you file a complaint with 311, the city will also look into that to make sure that the business itself, if it's operating, it is because it is providing essential services, or again, employees are telecommuting, right?
Thank you.
This is a question from DJ Stephanie. There doesn't seem to be a way to make any changes to unemployment insurance applications. Many of us did not upload documents online because it wasn't clear what they wanted from us, but there's no direct line to call and no way to make changes to our completed applications. What should they do?
So I think I mentioned Twitter earlier, and part of why I mentioned it is that I have seen DOL post at least a few different phone numbers that they advise people using to call and talk to somebody. The other thing is that I believe, and I may be incorrect, but I believe that you should be able to upload information to your application if it's still pending. And so I would go ahead and do that independently of being asked to do it. But again, we know, okay, Sash, we know that so many people's applications are pending. We don't entirely understand why. And it is the ordinary process for DOL to follow up with folks, with applicants when they do need more information. So a lot of people are just taking their own proactive information, even though they haven't been asked to, because it is not clear what's going to get the fastest outcome.
It's a question from Elliot. Are employers required to provide PPE, and will their unemployment insurance be affected if they refuse to work without being provided PPE?
Yeah, so there's the legal answer and there's the practical answer. The legal answer is that if you and or your colleagues together reasonably believe that you're being required to work under conditions that are endangering your health and safety, you may be able to refuse to work without consequences to your unemployment claim. However, that standard gets relaxed in a pandemic. So if you and your coworkers engage in that kind of protest and refusal, and file a complaint, I would advise filing a complaint with OSHA and the State Department of Labor about the working conditions. There's a chance that at some point there will be a legal determination that you are entitled to do that, but there will have to be a case-specific evaluation. So you have a right on paper, but in practice, it may be hard to utilize.
It's a question from Lauren, who's only recently filed their 2018 and 2019 taxes. Can their unemployment claims be denied?
I don't believe so. I'm not sure why they would be. As long as you're providing, you don't necessarily have to provide tax returns to DOL in order for them to determine the appropriate program to cover you and the appropriate weekly benefit. They just need evidence of your income. I would advise that you make sure that whatever you're providing to DOL to show your income matches dollar for dollar with what you're filing on your taxes. But beyond that, DOL will look at different kinds of evidence to determine eligibility and income and a benefit amount.
Okay, this is a question from Jody. Jody's a freelancer with their own LLC. Is it possible to receive both the PPP loan and or the EIDL loan and receive unemployment benefits simultaneously?
This is a great question. And I'm not sure there's an exact answer. On the one hand, there has been guidance that folks can, folks who are freelancers, self-employed, can qualify at the same time under both unemployment benefits and the Paycheck Protection Program. On the other hand, the constraints of that particular program make it unrealistic to be able to have both benefits at the same time, specifically because in order to really take advantage of PPP, you have to show that you're using 75% of the proceeds to cover wages. And so those would be your wages. And then you start to have a problem with, and then your UI benefits offset that. You're not going to hit 75%. It's challenging. In terms of the EIDL and the other kinds of loans available through SBA, I believe that you can both receive benefits from the department, unemployment benefits and those SBA benefits as well. I would check with the city's Small Business Services agency, which is putting out a lot of very helpful information about those loans and those programs in particular.
And they're actually going to be on with us tomorrow. So I think we are just at about time, right? As it's 2:30, and I just want to thank all of our panelists. And Liz, I've been on a bunch of these with you, and Sasha is, God bless him. No, look, I mean, it's an example of what we're all going through, and so, or what a lot of us are going through. So really just appreciate the time from everyone on the panel and really from everyone on the call. I know there's still a lot of questions, and there are a number of these types of forums happening. So please keep an eye out because if your question didn't get answered here, it may be answered in another forum. And we will be sharing notes and information that were shared during this call. So thank you, everyone. Stay safe and stay strong.